It's Friday, and today is a holiday, so I can do these Leetcode problems whatever I want. And I decided that I should probably do this problem today because I skipped over it several times because it's very, very, very difficult. I don't imagine that many novice people are going to look up this video on YouTube. This video will probably get very few views. But if you watch this video, at least to this point, please press like, please hit subscribe, just so I know that you're out there. Just so that I know that you're real. Comment something. Comment, hey bro, I'm real. And you'll be rewarded. But let's go ahead and get into this problem. Okay. So full disclosure, I've already solved this. It took me about 3 hours. This is not an easy problem at all. But it's pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so 2127, maximum employees to be invited to a meeting. A company is organizing a meeting and has a list of N employees. Okay, there's N employees waiting to be invited. They have been arranged for a large circular table capable of sitting any number of employees. Okay, so all N employees can fit at this one circular table. The employees are numbered from 0 to N minus 1. All right, nice. So there's not some weird one offset. Each employee has a favorite person, and they will attend the meeting only if they can sit next to their favorite person at the table. Okay, so I'll only go to the meeting if I can sit next to John. I don't care who's on the other side, right? But if I want to go to the meeting, me and John need to be together. And it's okay if someone I don't want to sit next to is next to me, right? I feel totally neutral about the person on the other side of me, right? If John's on my left, I don't care who's on my right. If John's on my right, I don't care who's on my left. All I know is I have left and right positions that people could be, and John needs to be in one of those. So that's an important thing to remember for this problem. Only if they can sit next to, if the favorite person of the employee is not themselves. Okay, so no one's really selfish, right? Like, I'm my own favorite employee. Okay, which means if we're thinking about this as a graph, right, there's no self loops because this problem already seems very graphy like, right? Given a zero indexed integer array favorite, where favorite I denotes the favorite person of the ith employee, return the maximum number of employees that can be invited to a meeting. Okay, so if you have person 0 with favorite person 2, person 1, favorite person 2, so we'll have these people, right? And how many people do we have? We got snap to shapes. Whatever. Okay. So we have 4 people. Look at that. Exponential. And we have person 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And 0 will only go if he's with 2. So 0 and 2 have to be together next to each other. 1 and 2 have to be together. 2 wants to be with 1, and 3 wants to be with 2. So everybody at this company, is just in love with person 2. Maybe that's the CEO. Maybe it's the most experienced engineer. Maybe it's someone who just always deploys code on time and doesn't make an issue about it, you know. Reasonable, respectful, resourceful, helpful, right? All the characteristics you love about your favorite developer. So everybody loves this person 2. So how are we going to sit these people together? Well, the output is 3, right? Because 1 wants to be next to 2. Right in this table. Let's draw the table. Boop. 1 wants to be next to 2. And 2's only going to go if he's next to 1. Right? So it makes sense that they're paired together, right? Because if 1 wants to be with 2 and 2 wants to be with 1, well, then they can go together with each other. And since they're both kind of mutually best friends, right? Like 1 loves 2 and 2 loves 1, so they might as well be together. And then 0 or 3 can be in this other position. Right now, with the people that are neighbors now, well, 2's neighbors with 0, 1's neighbors with 2, 1's neighbors with 0 and 2, right? So 0 needs to be next to 2. 0 doesn't care that it's next to 1, so that's fine, right? And 1 wants to be next to 2, so 1 doesn't care that it's next to 0. And 2 wants to be next to 1, so 2 doesn't care that it's next to 0, right? So as long as you're with your favorite person as your closest neighbor on one side, then you don't really care who's on the other side. Okay, well, one way you can look at this problem is kind of like a prerequisite problem in many ways. Meaning that there's this situation where I'll only go if this constraint is satisfied, right? So if we looked at this problem again, right, with the constraints where 0 loves 2, 1 loves, I don't know, I'm using love, but 2 loves 1, and 3 loves 2, right? If that's their favorite person, and I guess they love them now, I guess it's romantic. Don't call HR. What the hell? I swear, did I just delete this? Whatever. Okay, so 0 will only go if it gets to be next to 2. So if only 2's there, then can we have 0? 1 loves 2. So only if 2 is placed, can you then place 1? 2 loves 1. So only if 1 is placed, can you place 2? And 3 loves 2. So only if 2 is placed, can you place 3? So intuitively, you should think that, well, we're going to have a graph where each of the neighbors in the relationship is a directed edge where the favorite of some node leads to that node, right? Because the favorite of that node needs to be satisfied before this node can be added. So it kind of intuitively indicates, okay, this is going to be a directed graph. So let's just first do that. Let's see if we can turn this thing into a directed graph, right? So we're going to have this graph G, and G is going to have how many nodes? Well, length of favorite, right? Because my computer's almost dying, I think, and that's why it's starting to overreact. Please hold. Okay. In length of favorite, right? So there's that many nodes in the graph, and then we'll look at each UV and enumerate favorite. Actually, let's make this a set. It doesn't matter either way. I mean, it will for our final solution, but you can represent a graph using sets or nodes. Okay, so for UV and enumerate favorite, that basically means that this is going to be U, and this is the favorite of U. Right? Remember, we said that we're going to say the favorite of U has to be satisfied before we can satisfy U. And then let's just put this on one line so that we can flex to our friends that we did it in less lines. And let's just see if this graph makes sense. Right? So we should have the system that we drew over here. Right? So we have 0 pointing to nothing, which is an empty set. We have 1 pointing to 2 here. We have 2 pointing to 0, 3, and 1 here. And then we have 3 pointing to nothing. So that means that we've, correctly modeled this system as a graph. Okay. Now let's think about how we solve this. So in this case, we got the answer of 3. Right? Because what we were able to do is stall while I load up and get everything back in the right position. What we were able to do is look at these guys and say that, how am I going to explain this? So there's really 2 situations you need to think about. If you have the case like this, where you have a length 2 cycle, then any system of chains. So let's say we have just arbitrarily. Okay, well let's think of two ways we can add people to the table. Let's actually start with that, okay? So if you have a system where A needs to be satisfied before B, well, the only way B will be satisfied is if B is satisfied before C, right? And the only way C needs to be satisfied before D, right? So that means that B needs to be next to A, right? So if we had this circle, we'd say, okay, B needs to be next to A. And we'll do this in reverse, actually. So let's say we had this node B. Okay, let's start this way. Sorry, I'm just starting to think about how we're going to look at this. So you have this person B. Okay, what the hell is going on? This person B, big head. And B wants to be next to A. Right? So if I place B, then I need to place A on either side, right? But then I need to ask the same question again. Well, in order for me to place A needs to have a constriction. So A needs to be next to C. Let's imagine that there's another person, C, that A needs to be, that's A's favorite, that needs to be there next to A. Okay, so then we replace C. But now C has a constraint too, right? And I'll just call it this cloud. So at some point, the only way this chain is going to end is if somebody somewhere goes back to B. Right? Because I'm going to keep playing the same game, right? I'm going to play the same exact game. Okay, well, C, maybe imagine C needs to be next to D. Right? So then D comes on, but D's only going to come on if his constraint is met. So eventually, I'm going to make this a cloud to represent just a system of edges. Something needs to go back to B. That way you can get a cloud of people here, and that this person wants to be next to B, whoever this person is. That way this relationship is satisfied. So the idea is like, if I want to be next to somebody and they want to be next to somebody else, then that somebody else at some point needs to go down a line that's next to me, right? If there's three people that we want to sit together, let's just look at three people for kind of a more specific case, and maybe this general idea will make sense when you look at three people. Let's say we have people A, B, and C. How would it be the fact that all of them could sit together? All right, we want all these people to sit together. What would that mean? Well, if we'll make a small table because it's a few people. If A wants to be next to B and C, well, maybe B has to choose one of these people as his favorite, right? You can't have nobody's favorite, can't have self. So let's just say arbitrarily, right? It chooses one and it chooses this one, right? So no goes here. So B wants to be next to A. Okay. So if B wants to be next to A, it's like this, right? Now, if we want to add C to this, let's think of this cycle case. Well, if C wants to be next to A as well, right, then C. Well, if C isn't the favorite person of A, then C needs to be, if C's favorite person isn't A, then C's favorite person needs to be B, right? Because that way you have a constraint satisfied here, A to B. You have this constraint satisfied here, C to A to C. And then you have the last constraint satisfied here, B to C. Right? So the way that you do it is if you have a cycle in a graph, sorry, Siri just decided that I said something. So I guess the first thing is a cycle of people can be sat together in a table. And that kind of makes sense, right? It's like if I put all my favorite people to my left, right? So that's the idea. Like my favorite person is to my left, and this person's favorite person's to their left, and this favorite person's to their left, and this favorite person's to their left, and to their left, and to their left, right? The only way this is going to work is if eventually you get the system back to this case, right? And then if everybody's favorite person is to their left, you can put them in a table like that. So that's the first case. So if you find the largest cycle in the graph, that's one such way you can orient people and get the system. Now, I'm just going to go forward and say this is not the only way, but let's go ahead and deal with that first and see what we get. So in order to find the largest cycles in a graph, you're going to want to use topological sort, right? So I'm going to make just code that I've just through doing a bunch of topological sort problems, know exactly, and graph problems, know exactly how to write the code to find the largest cycle in a graph. All right, so 0 times length of favorite. All right, and then we'll do def. Yeah, we'll call it DFS. That's fine. So you have a node U. So if something's on the stack or it's already been traversed, not G of U. That's what C of U means. We return C of U. Oh, we need a count. C equals 1. Okay, and then if not, we say C is C equals C. Sorry, I'm listening to music on accident, and I thought it would be a good idea, but apparently I can't do it. Okay, so C of U equals C, and then when you're done, C of U equals float infinity. I can walk through how this code works if there's time, but just know that this is a very general, approachable way of finding the largest cycle in a graph through V and G of U. Now, we want the largest cycle in total, so we can say max cycle self equals 0. Say self.max cycle equals the maximum of this and self.max cycle. So it's 1 plus C minus DFS of V, C plus 1. So this code will find a max cycle in a graph because the max cycle means that you can set everybody to your left, and then return C of U. Because that'll be in the catch, so that's fine. Who cares? Okay. So will this find the max cycle? So we set C of U to C. So let's look at a problem where the solution is a cycle. Okay, so let's look at this one, and I'll basically show you how this works. Maybe not. The general idea is how this essentially works is it'll have the count C of something, and that thing is constantly increasing. So if you had, I'll just do it with a general graph so you can see the idea. So let's just create a cycle in a graph and see if we can determine its length like this. Okay, so imagine you started here. So what we do in our system here, right, is we add 1 to C every time we increase, and we start at 1. So we'll have C equals 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. Nothing will happen here. It'll return float infinity, and anything minus infinity is negative infinity, and this is the max, so it won't update max cycle, right? Max cycle will not be smaller than float infinity. So this will return nothing. It'll go down here. Now C will be 4. And then when it goes down here, it'll return 2, right? Because C has been set to 2 for... I'm tired of playing this weird game where I'm jumping around. Okay. And then we'll open this. Move that down here. Okay, so when we look at, remember we set C equals to 2 on this node here. And then, blah, blah, blah. And then 4, we'll say, okay, max cycle is then 1 plus 4 minus 2, which is 3. Right? Because we say max cycle is 1 plus this value, which is C, because C equals 4 here. C minus DFS of this thing, which is going to return 2, and this is 4, so 1 plus 4 minus 2 equals 3. Right, and that's the length of this cycle. So this will always find cycles. And then why do you set it to float infinity at the end? Well, what you could have happen is imagine you had a system like this. And okay. And imagine that the traversal actually started here and this system finished. And then this node starts and goes in. You don't want to do this process again. So you set it to float infinity. That way, if you go somewhere and it's already been traversed, then this will return infinity, and that'll ensure that max cycle doesn't get updated to something bigger and that it doesn't traverse the system again. So this is just a nice way of kind of shortening the length of this system. So this will return the max cycle, right? It'll give you the max cycle, I mean. So all you have to do now is just return self.max cycle, right? And that'll give you the largest systems where you always add people to the left, yeah. To the right, yeah. Minute, yeah. So let's submit this. And let's see. Come on. Let's see what it gives us. It gives us nothing. Why? All right, C of U, 0. Oh, because I never, so you have to run it on everything, right? So you look at each node in range, length of favorite, right? So I need to actually do this traversal. So let's run DFS on you. I just put an asterisk. It reminded me of C++ or something, and it scared me. I was like, I don't want to do that. What's going on, man? Okay. For V and G, we use self.max cycle equals this. So let's print U and then C. I don't know what's going on. This looks right to me, but you know. So here it should. Yeah, 1 is 1. When 2's on the stack, 1 is 1. This will return 1. Even that seems weird though. Let's see. So this is when 2's on the stack. It looks at 0, it returns infinity. Okay, it looks at 1 and it returns 1. What's the value of C? UCC. This is 2. Okay, even if, okay, so the largest cycle in this system is 2. So this is one of those examples that doesn't meet the conditions. The thing that's weird though, just kind of curious why. Because C is 2. C is 2. 1 returns 1. So 1 plus 2. What the hell's going on here? Look, C is 2 right here. Print X. X is 2. Slickle. Damn it. Sorry, guys. I misspelled something. Someone is screaming at me from the other side. I'm a fool! Alright, so let's try that again. Oh my god. Well, we already know what to do, so let's just do it again. So C plus 1 minus DFS of V of C plus 1. Okay, let's see. It's probably going to give me a... You outputted too much error. Just not... Okay. Oh, okay, I guess it doesn't matter. So how many did this pass? So 65. Okay, so what's going on? So this solution alone passes 65 out of 98 cases, right? So there's another case you have to consider, which is why you're only getting 65 out of 98, right? So you're getting roughly 65%-ish, right? A little more than 65% of the... dude, what is going on? My computer is like burning hot, so it just maxed, dude. My work computer can totally handle this. My MacBook Air from like 3 years ago is apparently too old now. And it can't handle, you know, just a little bit of compute. Three, two, one. For some reason, it's not loading. Okay, so now it's loaded. So I guess the next case we need to think about, right, is, well, why aren't these other systems still passing? Right, so when we look at this system of nodes, what is another condition where people can sit next to each other still without it being all my favorite people are to my left? Well, one thing about this problem is that an interesting thing can happen if you have two people, like person A. Let's say that person A and person B are best friends. See, here's another reason why being best friends, right? Having a state where people are best friends is really great, right? This is a situation where if you have a system of best friends, you'll notice that the problem is much less restrictive. Now, what do I mean by best friends? Well, I mean that, you know, person A loves person B and person B loves person A, right? I'll only go if John will go, and John will only go if I go, right? And in that case, it really frees up the problem because I can put him to my left and he can put me to his right. So there's still room on both sides for people that want to connect to us, right? So there can be a chain of people. And let's write this out in the problem. I was just looking at my beautiful face in the. I feel like I have like a not ugly nerd face. Would you guys agree with that? Like I look nerdy, but I don't look really ugly. I don't look like handsome, but it's like that's a nerd that, you know, goes out once a year. That's what I look like. So let's say person A and B love each other, right? So there's this relationship where A and B want to be friends with one another. Okay? Well, in that case, the screen doesn't load. Dude. I mean, in the screens, in the system's defense, I've been like opening and closing it like 100 times. So I might be asking too much. This video has really turned to shit, huh? Damn it. I'm just hoping. Like, that's so funny about technology is you just sit here and you just hope that things start working, you know? You're just like, wouldn't it be great if this started working? Okay, so if A and B love each other, right? That means that at this table, A will only go if B goes, and B will only go if A goes. So they can sit together like that, right? And that means if there's a person C, right? If there's a person C that will only go if they can sit next to B, well, that person can go too. Right? And it doesn't matter who's on the right of C because C satisfied, B satisfied, and A satisfied. Same with A. Any person that wants to go with A can go on the right of A. So imagine there's this person D. Well, that person can go here. Right? Because that person wants to be with A. Now, the only time where this gets more difficult, where you have to make a choice, is, well, what if there's a person E and F? Sorry, this goes the other way because A will only go if D goes. Sorry, the direction of this, even though it is like a prerequisite, it's kind of hard. Right? So should we put D here in this slot? Because both of these people will only go, right? E will only go if A goes. D will only go if A goes. Well, I can't do both, right? Because I can only put D next to A, or I can only put E next to A. But it's better to put E next to A, because if I put E next to A, I can also put F next to A. Right? So if I have a situation where people are mutually best friends, so there's a cycle of link 2, then I can make chains, the longest chain for any vertice. I can make the longest chain of any vertice connect. Right? So imagine B has a system here, where a bunch of people want to connect to B. Whichever of these systems is the largest will be the system that connects to B. And the beautiful thing too is if you have an exclusive system here, right? Like imagine you have G and H. Well, G and H only care about going there with each other. So if there's a chain there as well, G and H can be together in this system, independent of what's going on over here. So if you find a cycle, then there's a system where everyone has to be to the left. So this is one case, right? Or what you can do is take the linked two paths and find the longest chains that connect those linked two paths. And the sum of them works, right? Because there's this chain, there's this linked two path, and then the chains that connect. And there's this two link path, and there's no chains that connect. But that's the idea. Okay, so we have this case. So how do we find the longest paths for each node? Well, that's just DFS, right? So we'll redefine what DFS is here. We'll have U and a parent P if we'll return 1 plus the maximum of what? DFS of V of U for V in G of U if V not equal P, right? So if it's not equal to parent, because you don't want to have exhaust any cycle. And then the default value will be 0 if there is no such neighbor. And then we can put that on one line. So the solution is then, so we need to call DFS here on this one before we call it on the other one. So our solution is the max of doing the cycle approach, or the maximum of the sum of each two cycle path, right? So if you have DFS of U with parent V, DFS of V with parent U for U in G, for U in range length of favorite, for V in G of U only if U is in G of V. Because if V's in G of U and U's in G of V, that means that they're mutually best. They're each other's favorites, so they're essentially best friends. So that's this cycle 2 path. And then we divide that by 2 because we're going to overcount. Okay. Now, you might be asking, why do we do this U where we assume the parent is V, in V where we assume the parent is U? Well, all right, good. We're good. So we're good on that. The reason why we do that is because if we have a system, imagine you had a system like this, right? When these guys are mutually best friends, we want to consider the longest path of this system over here and this system over here, right? What we don't want to do is we don't want to consider these two paths, right? We want to consider, okay, what's your longest chain going this way? You can accidentally overcount, right? Because if you didn't have that condition, maybe you had a system like this. So you would say, okay, the longest path for this one is here, so that's 1 or 2, sorry. But then the longest path for this one is 3. Right? So you want to make this a barrier you can't pass. That way it only considers these systems exclusively, and this finds the length of 1 with the longest path being 3. Okay, guys. So what's the runtime of this? Well, there's just as many edges as nodes. So n plus n is n, 2n, which is n, big O. So we'll call n the length of favorite of U. We definitely need O of n right? You can never have like a double cycle, right? Because everything only points to one thing. So O of n space, this could look at each pair of nodes that are neighbors, and then run DFS. But since no two cycles can exist coexistively, this will only run through the graph once. Right? It could look because it'll look at different components of the graph that it can connect to. So that's O of n. So that's O of n, O of n, O of n. Right. Okay. And that's it for this video.